Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Cameron, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about my spring 2021 semester at the University of Florida. So, as everyone is aware, this last semester and this last year in general has really been a new and unique experience for not just college students, but any student in general. The COVID-19 pandemic and all of the madness that ensued certainly changed the way that education is executed. In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 different aspects of my semester at the University of Florida, including the academics, my campus involvement, and finally, the social life. Each of these things are extremely important into my overall experience at the University of Florida, and I think it'll be interesting for you to get my experience on it this last semester. So with this all being said, let's hop into the academics. So this spring was spring of my junior year. This means that I've pretty much finished up all my gen eds, all the random requirements that UF needs me to take before I can start all my major classes. In the past, I was still taking kind of the business school core classes, and then this semester was when I finally started taking those upper level finance courses. So I myself am a finance major, which is a pretty challenging major within the business school. I took 4 classes this semester, and I think it equated to 14 credit hours in total. I now am also getting a minor in leadership, so one of the classes that I took this semester is going towards that minor. The 4 classes that I took this semester was Leadership Development, International Business, Financial Accounting and Reporting 1, and Debt and Money Markets. So for the first time in my entire college experience, all my classes were pretty focused on my career and on my major. This definitely made it a little bit more interesting just because every class was, pretty prevalent to what I want to do with my career, whereas in the past I might have been taking, some general eds that had absolutely nothing to do with what I want to do in my life. But as I alluded to before, this is definitely a somewhat challenging schedule. Financial Accounting and Reporting, known as FAR 1, is definitely a challenging class. It's an interesting topic because previously UF only required accounting majors to take the class, but a few years ago they decided that us finance majors should also have a really solid accounting background, so they require that we take both FAR 1 and FAR 2 in order to graduate. This is on top of already taking financial and managerial accounting. Luckily, I did pretty well in those classes, so I felt pretty confident going into this semester. But giving a general overview of all the classes, Leadership Development, that was the class for my minor. That was definitely an easy class. I really did enjoy it. The professor was extremely passionate about what he was teaching, and that always translates well into your experience as a student. I really enjoyed this class, and this was the first class towards my leadership minor, and I'm really looking forward to all the classes in the future just because it's, stress-free, and the information that I do learn will be useful to all areas of my life. The second class was International Business. This is another one of those core classes that everyone in the business school has to take. So this allowed me to take it with a lot of other people within my fraternity, which just made it a little bit easier just because we could all keep each other updated on due dates and keep each other motivated for all the assignments and exams that would come up. This again was a pretty easy class. If you go to UF or if you're familiar with the classes, it's pretty similar in difficulty level to management or marketing. One of those classes where most students don't even bother watching the lectures, they just get the smoking notes and do perfectly fine on the exams. I actually thought this class was really interesting, so I did actually watch all of the lectures, still did the smoke notes, and of course I did pretty well on the exams, got an A in that class as well. Next up, FAR 1. As I said before, this is a very challenging class. I do have a pretty solid accounting background just because I did pretty well in financial and managerial accounting, but obviously this is advanced accounting, so it definitely presented some challenges. This was 100% the class that I put the most effort and work into this semester. In the end, I ended up with, I think, a 90.5 or something, which at the beginning of the semester would have been an A-, but luckily the class average was pretty poor this semester, so the professor actually scaled down the grading scale, so the 90 actually ended up being an A, so I was really happy to get the A for this class. I understandably was pretty thrilled when the professor scaled down the grading scale to give me an A. This was one of those classes where I honestly would have been okay with not receiving an A just because it was so difficult. And also relative to the other students in the class, I was performing extremely well, so that made me feel just a little bit better. Also, I talked about in my resolutions for 2021 video that I wanted to be a little bit more okay with not getting all A's. I think trying to go for a perfect 4.0 and straight A's just puts a lot of unnecessary pressure on you. I had certainly felt this in the past, and because of this, I was kind of okay with accepting the A minus. Obviously, I would have preferred an A at the time, but I knew that an A minus was still spectacular and that overall it might be good for my mental health. But in the end, I actually did get the A, so this whole conversation was a total waste. Now, finally, the last class was called Debt and Money Markets. This is one of the upper level finance classes that each finance major has to take, and it definitely presented some challenges. First of all, the professor was Chinese, so the language barrier between him and the students was pretty difficult. In addition to this, the class was again hybrid, so some students were allowed to go in person to the class and most students had to watch virtually, and just the overall Zoom layout just presented a lot of challenges. The audio would be kind of muffled, and that made understanding him even harder than it already was. In addition to this, he would teach most of the quantitative stuff through Excel, even though we weren't allowed to use Excel on the exams. So we really had to learn how to do everything by hand on our own or through reading one of the suggested textbooks, and it was really just a lot of learning on your own instead of learning through the professor. This was another class where I was pretty close to that A range the entire semester. I again thought I had an A minus at the end of the semester, and then finally when the transcript came in, I ended up with an A. So definitely thrilled about that. Certainly not as hard as FAR 1. I didn't quite put as much work in as that class, but still a challenging class nonetheless, and very fortunate to have ended up with an A. So I was very fortunate to get another 4.0 this semester. I somehow was able to do it. Although I did get the 4.0, it only brought up my cumulative GPA about 0.01 points, so a little upset about that. It took me from a 3.87 to a 3.88, so still not thrilled, still not a summa cum laude, but definitely happy nonetheless. So those were the 4 classes that I took this last semester. Definitely a very challenging semester, but at the same time, it worked out pretty well, so no complaints whatsoever on my end. So the second topic of this video that I want to discuss is my campus involvement at the University of Florida this last semester and kind of how it was changed due to COVID. Now, I pride myself on being very involved on campus. I'm in student government, I'm in multiple positions within the business school, and then also socially with my fraternity. The COVID-19 pandemic certainly changed the way we had to approach a lot of events and networking and meetings and pretty much anything you can imagine. With student government, it definitely made our lives a lot harder just because we were somewhat responsible for coming up with the action plans for all the different student organizations, how they were allowed to meet, what they were allowed to do, and everything else that comes along with that. If you watch my week in the life video, I showed the end of year banquet that I helped put together through student government. That was a lot of fun. My position this last year was Executive Secretary of Finance and Fees, so I overall had a great time doing that, even though of course it was a little bit different than if it was a traditional non-COVID schedule. Most of our meetings were virtual or through Zoom, but when we were planning the banquet, we did have one in-person meeting at the union, but of course everyone was socially distanced, wearing masks, and following all the guidelines. One of the other things that I'm pretty involved in at UF is the Leadership Development Program. This is a student organization within the business school that I've been involved with since my freshman year. I am a mentor in this program now. I started off as a mentee, and I've really just enjoyed helping out a lot of students, similar to what I do in these YouTube videos. Now, in a normal semester, all of LDP would meet in one of the rooms in the business school, converse there, break off into small groups, the usual way that a student organization might work. But because of COVID, all of the meetings were virtual, which kind of affected the way that you socialized and the way you built the relationships. It's definitely harder to foster good personal connections virtually instead of being in person, but I still felt that I had a great experience through that, and I hope that all of the students and the mentees felt the same way. Another aspect of my campus involvement that I just want to update you guys on is my involvement with the Business College Council. This is kind of the governing body that oversees all the student organizations within the business school. A few months ago, I was elected as VP of Finance for this position. So I'm extremely excited to see kind of where that goes in the future into next year. Just another way for me to give back to the business school that has given me so much. So that was kind of my campus involvement aspect of my spring semester. Still was able to be extremely involved. but because of COVID, it just changed the way that things were run, just because it had to be virtual, which definitely limited the personal connections and relationships that you could foster. Now, finally, and probably the most important thing about someone's college experience is the social life. So, as I mentioned before, I am involved in Greek life, which traditionally is a lot of fun. There's so many opportunities to meet new people, have amazing experiences, and of course, this was pretty affected by COVID-19. UF's IFC had very strict rules and regulations about what fraternities and sororities could and couldn't do. There were not allowed to be any social events whatsoever in the fraternity houses, so this obviously limited the amount of things that a fraternity could do. But despite all the things that the fraternity couldn't do, there were a lot that we could do. This included having bar tabs and certain events at bars and restaurants and locations around Gainesville. So despite not being able to have events and tailgates at the house, we still were able to throw plenty of events at bars and other locations. This still made the semester a lot of fun. It was definitely more social than the fall, just because people at this point were a little bit more relaxed and used to all the regulations. I sadly was not able to attend any sporting events this semester. Usually I loved going to the basketball games, but honestly the combination of my pretty tough semester and all the strict limits and regulations on the student seating, it made it pretty tough to get out to a basketball game. But overall, I think the social life of UF was still intact this last semester. It certainly made a comeback after a pretty rough fall. From the start of the spring semester, everyone in Greek life was to get tested for COVID once every 2 weeks. So this kind of allowed the monitoring and the testing of Greek life to make sure that everyone stays safe to work pretty well. It'll be really interesting to see how things look in the fall. I think UF football games have already said that they would allow full capacity, which I am thrilled about. And I know everyone at UF is really hoping that tailgates at the fraternity houses are allowed to make a comeback. So that was the final aspect of my spring semester, the social life. So that's kind of a quick roundup of my spring semester at UF. It definitely was different than a traditional semester in the past, but it was still a successful semester nonetheless. Luckily, living in Florida, we were still able to get a somewhat normal college experience that not only allowed us to learn, but also to live a lot of those social experiences that college is all about. I think overall, it was definitely worth it to attend UF this last spring and the fall before. I know a lot of students were weighing the option between going up to Gainesville or maybe staying home and just taking classes fully remote, but I'm very glad that I decided to go up to Gainesville, and I have no regrets whatsoever. So that's the entire video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you have any questions, reach out to me on Instagram right here. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. The link to that will be down in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.